الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, I'll try to keep this presentation as short and concise as possible. I'm sure you guys don't want to listen to a long speech, especially before a lecture, and especially by two people who are related to each other. So the topic that I'll be discussing today is one that requires our attention, and it's one that we should all put our effort together as a community to tackle. The topic is social media and the impacts of social media. So unfortunately, this topic is kind of brushed aside by most of us. We tend to ignore the topic and not really take it seriously. We see that everyone's using it, everyone has social media, everyone's on the platforms, so let's just go with the flow. It won't mean anything if it can't be that bad. That's what we always say. But in reality, it is harming us and it is taking a toll on our health, both mentally and physically. So first of all, of the many negative impacts that social media has, is that it is constructed to make us addicted to it. And so it does this by making us slaves to what's called instant gratification. Instant gratification is the constant gratification of one's desires, the constant satisfaction of one's desires, and it does this by triggering the release of dopamine in our body. So dopamine is that feel-good chemical in our body, and it is what we feel when we feel satisfied, when we feel accomplished, when there's a reward, when we feel good about ourselves. So this is released in times of, for example, success and accomplishment, like if we were to get that final grade on our exam that we were expecting and we did really well on, or like if we get into a job that we've been applying for a while and we finally made it, so we feel accomplished. These examples that I'm giving you, however, are examples of delayed gratification. These examples are examples of someone working hard, putting in the time, putting in the effort, and eventually reaching these levels with time and stress in the process. Social media makes this delayed gratification much more difficult. It makes it much more challenging for us to get to these levels because we don't feel that rush of dopamine when we are studying for the exam, for example. In fact, it's stressful and it's anxiety that we feel during those times. So it makes it much more difficult and it makes us depend on that instant gratification, which we won't get. It's the exact same impact that addictive drugs have on us. Addictive drugs, they are made to attack the dopamine receptors as well. And what they do is they make us rely and depend on it. And eventually, the physiology says that eventually your body just gets used to it and it wants more and it needs more. So only to maintain. So basically what social media does is that it imitates human connection. So the imitation of human connection is what releases these dopamine chemicals in our body. So for example, that like on Instagram, that comment on how you look, or that short clip that you'll see that you can relate to, these are all ways that dopamine is released where we kind of feel good, and it's an imitation of human connection. So this imitation is what brings me to my second point, which is that it creates an unrealistic image of what is expected in reality. So in our day-to-day lives, we'll see on social media things that are basically impossible for us to actually achieve in real life. An example is the expectation of our body shape that social media portrays. It portrays a certain body shape and a certain body type that we have to maintain. And eventually, it just affects our self-confidence, affects our self-esteem, and it's basically impossible for us to reach those levels. So a study done in the School of Psychology in the University of Sydney shows a direct correlation, listen to this, a direct correlation between increased usage of social media and between body dissatisfaction levels and body objectification levels in both males and females. So none of us are safe. We're all prone to such harms. An example to elaborate is that if someone tends to see themselves in a view of social media that they don't reach these expectations, they don't meet these standards of how a person should look, they end up feeling a sense of unhappiness and unsatisfaction with their body, and they begin to fall into eating disorders, as we see in many young teenagers, especially females. You see them falling into eating disorders, you see them dieting, and it's very harmful and has a very negative impact on our body. On the other hand, if they do fall into the category of expectations for society on social media, then their body, they will tend to objectify themselves. They'll tend to show off their body. They will tend to just play a role in the continuation of this terrible and this detrimental social norm. So without it, we're able to be content with what we have and who we are, and the absence would also allow us to make valuable connections, which is the last point, which is the connections you find on social media. So that was one of the biggest factors that I see a lot of people, they tell me, I need my connections, it maintains my connections. It's possibly the only valid argument that you can give me. Anything else, I would probably tell you that's not a valid argument. This one may be valid, but it requires a adequate understanding of its effects. So the connections that you have in real life are social media. What it does is it creates a facade. It makes you think you have a lot more friends than you really have. It makes you think you're more popular than what you really are. And in reality, there's not that many people who care about you in this world. There's not that many people who will be there for you when you truly need them. And so it's better for you to not give that platform and that opportunity for people to act like they truly care about you when they won't be there for you. And what I always tell my friends is that if someone wants to reach you, if they care about you, they'll find a way. They don't need to find you on a social media platform. Inshallah, my goal here isn't to push everyone away from social media. My goal isn't to tell everyone to delete their social medias. But from my experience, my personal experience, I've experienced nothing but growth, nothing but liberation, nothing but a positive outcome from deleting my social media platforms. And inshallah, this as some small piece of advice for as a youth of the community, as a servant of Abu Abdullah, inshallah, you can use this to just shed light on the fact that it's a big deal and it's not something small. We should actually take care of it. We should look into it, and we must take responsibility in the way we use social media so we don't fall into these harms. With that being said, that is my speech. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.